amounts are at increased risk for dehydration for a variety of reasons. One being that they change their thirst drive over time. So they're less likely to stimulate, their body's less likely to actually drive the need for thirst. So there's some biochemical changes that happen in the body, and the renal function actually stimulating the thirst drive seems to decrease with age for a variety of reasons. Additionally, they have lower lean body mass, and lean body mass is what has our fluid in the body. So automatically they're carrying around less water, which means that they're stressed, like with a fever, or they have vomiting or diarrhea for a short period of time, they're more likely to be dehydrated as a result. Additionally, when we think about the effects then of that dehydration in older adults, they can range from everything from fatigue to renal dysfunction. I think in the residential sector, what we see most commonly is falling, and we also see confusion, which we might think is like dementia that's going on, or delirium. And so those are the most common signs we see in that setting. That can lead, though, obviously to hospitalization. So thinking about someone having a fall, for example, and breaking a bone, ends up in an unnecessary or avoidable, let's say, hospitalization, which can be quite traumatic for that individual who's living in a residence. We really don't know the prevalence of dehydration in long-term care. One, it's hard to measure. You have to have a blood test. And anybody who works in this environment recognizes it's unlike acute care where blood is drawn all day long. And there's a lab in the basement often, or one very close by that does lab work. Long-term care is not like that. People are not drawing blood on a routine basis. So we really don't know. And without that, we can't get a sense of the prevalence of dehydration. So it's been estimated that it could be quite high. It's going to be higher probably in individuals with dysphagia. And I think we quite frankly should assume that everybody in long-term care is at risk for dehydration as a result, because of those challenges I spoke of with respect to why they might be dehydrated in the first place. There's a variety of reasons why individuals with dysphagia might have poor fluid intake and be at risk for dehydration. First are those physiological changes that happen with everybody who's aging, right? The lack of the thirst drive, the decreased lean body mass, and the renal function, meaning they are spilling more water into the urine, they're not concentrating the urine. So that's the first thing. Most people with dysphagia tend to be older, right? And those in long-term care are obviously that way as well. But in addition to that, dysphagia, there's a variety of things. It could be the product. They're not accepting the products that are being provided to them that are thickened. It might be unpalatable. Staff who might be making those products at bedside or tableside or in the servery in the dining room might be variable in how thick they make them. The consistency might change over time and get thicker, which means they're not very palatable to consume. There's certainly an issue with cost. So if people are wanting to purchase pre-prepared products, there's a very limited budget for food and fluid in long-term care in most settings. And in many provinces of Canada, for example, there isn't a minimum that you have to spend, which means people are going to try to cost save with respect to food and fluid in long-term care. So that's a key concern. And then finally, recognizing that people with dysphagia also likely have other reasons why they're not drinking enough. They might have dementia, which means they forget to drink, or they might be people we call sippers. They just drink very small amounts at a time. Key strategy to support hydration in persons with swallowing disorders is through thickened fluids. That seems to be the only strategy that's been used broadly and globally to address this issue. It could be made in-house, of course, or pre-prepared. So I'm not a swallowing expert by any means, but my understanding is that when you thicken a fluid, you slow down the flow. When you slow things down, the ability for the swallowing mechanism to be able to handle that bolus is going to be better, because you're basically trying to protect the airway by getting the epiglottis going over the airway and keeping it safe. So by slowing everything down, you give the body the time to do what it's supposed to do. So I think it's really important to recognize that about 80% of fluid, now this is for people on thin fluids, 80% of fluid is consumed outside of meals. And this is a challenge for persons with dysphagia because we often only offer thickened fluids at meal times and snacks. It may not be as routine to give a thickened beverage to individuals with dysphagia. So that's a key thing, is to think about all points in time when you're giving hydration out to any resident. Those who have dysphagia also would get a appropriate thickened fluid for themselves at that point in time as well. So that's the first thing. Secondly, thinking about in addition to thickened fluids and making sure they have a prescription that meets their requirements for fluid in the body, also think about, can we support them with high fluid foods? That's another strategy that we need to do a bit better work on with respect to desserts, for example, pureed fruit, soups, those sorts of foods have high fluid content. And so maximizing the nutrition in those foods to make sure they meet their nutrient requirements as well as food requirements would be another strategy.